I recently had the 2024 Community Quilt professionally photographed, so now it is time to send it off to the person who won it last year. But before I send any quilt out, I always like to give it its first wash. That way I can help mitigate any fabric bleed. If there's any shrinkage, it's already shrunk by the time the person gets it. And if any seams fail, I can correct them before it gets sent on its way. Now, it's pretty rare that any of that happens, but I just like to have that control over it before it goes on to its final recipient. So I'm going to throw it up on the wall so we can give it one last look before it takes its first bath. Now, last year's quilt is pretty big. It ended up being a total of 144 blocks to be 96 inches by 96 inches. And it will shrink a little bit, but it's still a very sizable quilt. And there it is. So you can see it drapes onto the floor just a little bit. Granted, it's not all the way up at the ceiling, but we can use that as a gauge once it's out of the wash to see how much it shrunk. Now, whenever I wash quilts, I always wash them with cold water and a mild detergent, and then on its first couple washes, I will use some sort of color catcher. Now, these are just sheets that you throw into the wash, and any dye bleed that comes off of the fabric, these will absorb. Last year, there was a couple spots of some questionable fabrics, which I was pretty sure were going to bleed out their color. So I actually used some safety pins and pinned the color catchers directly on top of those spots, and that seemed to work pretty well. Now this year, there aren't really any fabrics that I am positive are going to bleed, so I'm not going to worry about pinning these directly onto that, but I'm going to throw a bunch of these into the wash with it. So now I'm going to get it washed and dried, and then we'll hang it back up and see the after results. All right, it's the next day because I ended up washing the quilt 3 times before I put it in the dryer, and I did use a lot of color catchers. So this was after the first round. You can see it's kind of reddish. Second round, less red, but still kind of dingy. And then the third round, it's a little dingy, but not bad at all. There it is. And it shrunk quite a bit. You can see it's hanging about the same distance from the ceiling, but it's now just barely touching the floor. So now I'm all ready to pack it up and send it on to the winner.